here in Berlin, we can definitely compete with places like London or events in New York. Meeting so many amazing people, talking to so many thought leaders, like-minded individuals.
Really proved that it is very valuable to have those meetups.
Information infrastructure.
I've been here since 2013, and it's great to still see this ecosystem growing.
It feels like I met everyone here today.
My key takeaway of this event is it was great.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our digital festival preview. My name is Madeleine, and I'll be guiding you for the next 30 to a maximum of 40 minutes. One organizational note before we getting started. If you have any questions, please put them down below in the comment section, along with your name, where you're from, and who the question is for, and then we'll answer them at the end. So let's get started with project lead Lisa Dallier.
Hi, Madeleine.
Hi, Lisa. Tell us, what are you looking forward to the most?
Most difficult question first. I would say, since FIBE is a networking event, I am most excited that we have expanded our networking opportunities, and that is, to put a name on it, the FIBE Tiergarten Meet and Green. There, all guests, partners, and speakers can get into depth with each other in two different ways. Firstly, we have a one-on-one area where you can book a table for individual conversations in 20-minute slots. This area is kind of separated, but still part of the action. It was really important to us, providing a much better environment for more personal discussion, so to say. And on the other hand, there will also be the well-known networking session area from 2024, but this time much cozier and more exclusive. And as my personal favorite, you can book one of our new marketing consultation sessions with a marketing fintech hub there.
Fabulous. Let's move over to the next thing. In January, you all remember, or Lisa, you will remember, that in our newsletter, we asked our readers what would be most interesting to find out during this festival preview. And the majority said they'd like a sneak peek at the types of companies, people, and investors joining. So please give us a breakdown.
Of course. Honestly, I'm really, really proud to say that in 2025, you will once again succeed in bringing together the entire financial ecosystem. So far, we can tell that our audience consists of nearly 40% fintechs, such as Trade Republic, Scalable, and Namirial, as well as startups like Global Fintech Talent or Bankify from Helsinki. 1/3 of the attendees come from banks, including Berliner Sparkasse, Sutor Bank, Berliner Volksbank, and Starling Bank. And lastly, 15% are from consulting firms, and 10% are VCs, such as Blackfin, Neosphere, and Motive Ventures. And even though we are an European financial festival, we will be able to welcome participants from the US, Singapore, and Egypt, just to name a few. So in fact, we will be joined from all over the world.
Thank you so much. Let's move over to our key themes. And I may ask Carola Bergmann, Head of Event Production at Handelsblatt and co-founder of Berlin Finance Initiative, Caroline Wahl, to switch on your cameras. Hi.
Hi. Hello. Hi. Good lunchtime. Not good morning anymore.
Well, in Georg's case, it's Carola, let's dive straight into the key themes. What makes the program particularly relevant right now?
Yeah, sure. So currently we are seeing major geopolitical shifts reshaping the fintech hubs in the US and Asia, but also in Europe. And they affect regulations, investment, and technology. And at the same time, artificial intelligence is revolutionizing the industry, boosts productivity and drives innovation. So on stage, we will talk with fintechs and banks, how they are tackling these challenges and how they take advantage of these new opportunities.
Yeah, and maybe as an addition, sorry, Madeleine, to interrupt, we also see this strong intersection between politics and fintechs on stage and in the topics we selected. For example, we will have their climate tech pioneer Saskia Beusner on stage talking about climate tech, which is at the moment a well-discussed topic, not only in the US, but also in Europe now after the elections. And also we have Dr. Jörg Hauer joining us, who is of course, in the spot right now to talk after the elections, how we continue with Germany, what we can expect. So this is, of course, something that is very exciting at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And back to you, Carola, and also for Caro, what sets this year's program apart from the previous edition?
Yeah, we have a couple of new features on stage. For example, we include deep dives into growing international fintech hubs, such as, for example, India, the Nordics, and the US. And to get the latest insights from these markets, we will not only bring the founders and investors live on stage in Berlin, but we will also connect live via video with our Handelsblatt correspondents in Silicon Valley and in Shanghai. So we will get live information from there.
Yeah, and maybe in addition to that, like how you can see this in their stage setting is that this year we really have on the festival stage the overall strategic world topics, and on the club stage more, as Carola already mentioned, the deep dive topics where we really dive into specific industries, like for example the future of the wealth industry, with someone from Apollo joining, as well as a future of the insurtech industry, as well as diving deep into regulational topics like DORA, like FIDA, where of course many people have open questions right now, and this is why it's so interesting to participate and bring these different perspectives together.
Yeah, and FIBE really offers highly interactive formats, so everyone can ask their question, they can talk directly with the experts, and so you can really get most of your visit if you really participate actively at the festival stage, club stage, or even at the Späti.
Yes, and Caro, why do you think these topics resonate with today's audience?
They do resonate with today's audience, as well as they're super interesting, of course, also for medias to join, is because when you check online, you see that we not only have a lot of prominent faces from the industry joining, so people that really are shaping the industry right now in both banking as well as in fintech or in the VC industry. But also what's particularly interesting is that these people, or some of them at least, bring relevant news to the stage. Yeah. So to give you an example, today there was an announcement on Taylor SME fintech from Switzerland. They announced a big M&A news taking over Grenke's factoring business. And next week, Patrick Stolpe, the CEO, will join us on stage to talk for the first time on this acquisition, the story behind what is coming next. And this is something which is, of course, interesting on the one hand for everyone who is interested in the industry to learn from his approach, from his acquisition strategy, but also for journalists to gain these first insights, to ask questions and maybe also meet with these people that are sharing this news afterwards, backstage or on site, in the location, to do background talks and get to know the stories better.
Thank you for your points. The next person now joining me is the second co-founder of Berlin Finance Initiative and CEO of Ostdeutscher Bankenverband, Achim Oelgarth.
Wow, nice to meet you here, Madeleine.
Hi, Achim. Tell us, we're seeing a growing trend in banks participating in FIBE and Simula events. From your perspective, what does that signify, and why is it important for banks or traditional financial institutions to be part of these spaces?
Well, first of all, congratulations to this really nice lineup of speakers, diversity, And this is also thanks to the wonderful, almost all women FIBE team at this point. And this is great. Well, to your question, I learned, interesting to see that 30% of banks are in the audience, coming up into the audience next week. This is quite a move forward. The clear answer is, I think in the first year, everybody's looking like, how is it developing? Let's see how it all comes. And this year, it is so clear you have to be there. And what is the reason behind this? 10 years ago, fintechs were the idea engines, and they haven't been taken too serious on what they are doing. And the fintech and finance world evolved, and today banks look very with a sharp view on how banks can innovate, how they meet the right people. It's also a question of finding the right talents, and so in the core, banks are always good corporate citizens and innovators from themselves now, and this is a change in their way of looking on how they build their strategies and how they move forward. And so going to the FIBE, it's a perfect place to meet the people, to shape the future together. And when talking about together, it means like, well, they look into investing into fintechs, they look into cooperation, they look into learning new ideas, knowing everybody around. And so it's a very positive development. But actually, this is all what we do the FIBE for. It is building the next generation finance hub from Berlin.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate a bit more how this engagement influences the collaboration with fintechs?
The collaboration is very much on so different levels. When you look into platform economy, we have to see how can you offer services as banks together with fintechs, or when you go into payments area, what is the latest trend and what are the challenges, or where we have lost, like the banks, maybe some of the battle to learn to cooperate. And then when it goes deeper into the big trend of AI, we've seen already last year that all the topics around the KYC and AML topics have been very important.
One second. Just 1 second, Achim, before you continue, you're muted. Can you hear me?
Data or APIs, how to build on the powerful tool. Step. I'm not going that far that it goes into all automatic lending and customer experiences. No, that's not the point. It's more like really lifting efficiency and making the core banking system sounder. And this is basically it's curiosity to be there and to learn, and then of course go into action.
Lovely. I had a third question prepared for you, though the second half of your last question, you were muted, and at least I couldn't hear you properly. So maybe let's try if your computer is working with us or against us with this third question, and if not, I'm jumping in. So my third question would would basically be just very quick, the specific benefits that banks can gain from participating in FIBE.
Well, the specific benefits are very simple, threefold: innovation scouting, talent, connection, reputation, and relevance, and be a serious player in technology, and just have a footprint in the whole ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Speak to you in a few minutes. But first, our next speakers are two true experts in the world of fintech and open banking, each with an impressive track record of driving innovation in the industry. First up, we have Sarah Häger, a leading voice in open banking and the CCO at Enable Banking. With over 15 years at Nordea, she played a key role in shaping API technology and fostering the open banking community. We all know that if we follow her on LinkedIn. Today, she helps businesses unlock the potential of open banking and has been recognized as one of the top 75 female future leaders. Kudos for that. Joining her is Georg Hauer, a fintech entrepreneur and advisor with a deep expertise in scaling digital banks. As the former general manager at N26 and an expert in banking compliance software, he now works closely with fintechs, banks, and investors to drive growth and innovation through his firm, Hauer Fintech Advisory. Hi, you two.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. I know that where Georg is right now, it's still very early. So let's start with you, early bird. Georg, you work with banks across different regions worldwide. I put two questions in this first part for you. How do you position Europe in the global landscape when it comes to banking innovation and digital transformation? And how do you assess the current initiatives in the European banking sector?
Absolutely. So indeed, I'm building digital banks around the world. If anyone is curious, I'm currently still in Nicaragua, where it's 5:30 in the morning. But what's interesting is that fintechs around the world are kind of solving the similar challenges, but it takes years to really figure out how to come to the same solutions. Europe itself is a true powerhouse in fintech. If you compare it to many other regions around the world, Europe is extremely advanced. In fact, it's also has economic importance nowadays for the entire European continent. Because if you look at, for example, the 20 largest companies, the top 10 companies that were founded in the last 20 years in Europe, 6 of them are fintechs. That includes Revolut, that includes Agent, Klarna, N26 and others. And if you go into the top 25, it's even more. So it's really impressive what Europe has built over the last decade. And Berlin is one of the 3 hotspots for fintech. So I think Europe is actually quite uniquely positioned to essentially build fintech innovation for around the world. What I'm focusing on is still to understand differences across the world, how we can get better fintech innovations for Europe, because there is a lot of very exciting fintech innovation around the world, which might have very strong importance also for Europe, and vice versa. What innovation in fintech has relevance for other countries and can be exported to the rest of the world from Europe, but at the same time also, how can we bridge the gap, the knowledge gap for other countries, so that other countries can accelerate the way that they build their digital banks or their infrastructure fintechs.
Yeah, it works both ways. Now, speaking about the panel that you're hosting next week on super apps and other trends, what Europe can learn from global fintechs, why is this topic particularly relevant right now?
Yeah. In terms of the super apps, we have so what we've seen in other countries, unlike Europe, that super apps have become more and more important for companies beyond banking. So especially in Asia, but nowadays increasingly also in Africa, there are many fintechs that started out of banking or cover essentially some of the most dominant fintechs in the country, but essentially ventured out to many other aspects of the country. And there is a very high hypothesis that the next wave of innovation in Europe will include the emergence of super apps, despite the fact that the user behavior in Europe still differs quite a lot to Asia. My goal in the panel is to explore first of all, innovation around the world. I'll have a quick impulse talk on looking into Asia and a few other, picking a few case studies on that, and then shifting to the panel where we deep dive into 2 very interesting fintechs that most likely you've never heard about. One is the large and very up and coming bank from Greece, a country that many might not associate with innovative fintech innovation, but truly has a very innovative approach to banking. And on the other side, Khazna, which is Egypt's most successful fintech. And we might deep dive into essentially what makes them interesting and what Europe can learn from it. But then we are also going to take a more larger glance, especially on the Middle East, Africa, but as also in general, just take a glance outside of the Berlin, London, Paris fintech bubble to understand what are the features that are actually relevant and truly inspiring for Europe and could have a relevance for the emergence of a new super class of super apps in Europe.
Thank you. I'll be definitely among the people in the audience because that's a topic that I want to write about. Can you share some examples of successful super apps around the world and what we can learn from them?
Yes, so I would say the classic examples are WePay or WeChat in China, as well as Grab in Southeast Asia. Two super apps, however, you might not have heard before, which in my opinion are absolutely worth knowing, is Kakao in South Korea and Kaspi in Kazakhstan. So the first one from South Korea is often actually cited as the original super app. They're often cited as the inspiration for WePay and WeChat. They are truly impressive by a lot of metrics, including essentially that 1 in 2 South Koreans are using the app daily on their phone and also having their bank account there, which is incredible. Like you can essentially do everything there. Kaspi, however, in Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan is not really a country where a lot of people look for fintech innovation. However, what's so impressive is that it might be one of the most encompassing and comprehensive super apps around the world, because you can't just essentially hold your primary account there. You can transfer to other banks internationally or trade your stocks there, but you can also do essentially all your shopping there. You can order your plov, which is the national dish of Kazakhstan, online, but you can also file your taxes or even found a company, literally a legal entity, directly from your banking app, which is totally mind-blowing. Especially if you compare it, for example, to the process that it takes to found a company in Germany. So definitely worth looking into some of those apps. And if you can take just some inspiration from some of these apps and think about what implication could that have for Europe, you might already accelerate your innovation process quite significantly. Not all innovation needs to be reinvented here in Europe.
Crazy. No, I haven't heard of the two last ones that you mentioned. Thank you. Sarah, that's your cue now. We've seen successful super apps in Asia. What would it take for Europe to replicate that success?
I'm seeing a lot of differences in between Europe and Asia in that sense. You have the amount of people living there, 1.6 billion are speaking Mandarin. A bit more than 600 million are speaking Hindi. And if you look to Europe, only 250 million are speaking English. Then you add to that we're a very mature market. We came online through laptops first and then mobile, whereas Asia has in many countries gone the opposite route, where they went directly through mobile solutions. We have another cultural diversity and a lot of regulations existing here, but not in Asia, and very mature and competitive markets in the banking space with very low banking fees in comparison to Asian markets. So when you consider all these different factors, you need to find a niche where you actually can find good margins, margins that are sufficiently high to convince an investor of the business case, and then to be able to grow that business case across European countries, regardless of the culture, of the language, and of the different regulations applying to different countries here. So there's a completely different knowledge needed, and it's a completely different experience with several different markets needed.
Speaking about this gap, the Nordics are seen as pioneers in banking digitalization within Europe. What developments are happening in this space?
Coming from the banking space myself, I see a lot of different initiatives where banking is being moved out of banks. So non-banks are now the ones offering the best banking services. You have the greatest credit cards created by companies outside of banking. You have ERP and treasury services that are taking up more and more banking services. And I think with the help of open banking and with the AI, the barriers have been lowered even further, meaning it's even easier today to produce banking services without being a bank than it was 5 or 10 years ago. So ERP, treasury, FX, different corporate services, lending, factoring, reconciliation services, loyalty services are emerging based on both open banking and on AI. See different AI agents and different use cases for either for sales or outreach, for LinkedIn, for banking. ESG is also really important still in the Nordics. There's a lot of focus on this. Of course, we have the infrastructure laid out already. If you look to digital identity and instant payments, etc., that's something where Central Europe and the SEPA countries still need to implement. But we see, you could say, the next wave of digital ID solutions coming to the market, and a lot of different companies innovating by combining these. And this is something I'm going to be speaking more about next week.
Which I'm very much looking forward to. Lastly, how do you foster an innovation-friendly environment, and what key learnings can the rest of the world take from your approach?
I see a few different things that are really sticking out if you compare the Nordics to other countries. And the first thing is that the governments have given us a lot of different enablers. And then we, the people, are deciding what do we want to make out of them. We're giving free education, we're given free medical support, free dentist support, etc. for all children and the youth. And that's the first enabler to get highly educated and to get the masses highly educated. There's also the culture that we trust new solutions. We want to try new solutions. We're curious to test them, and we want to try the latest. So like I said before, the basics are already done in the Nordics. We have the digital ID. We've had instant payments for more than 10 years. And now it's a lot of focus on how do we continue to innovate by combining different items. My famous quote of saying innovation by combination. How can we pick these different infrastructure pieces and then piece them together into new combinations? So a lot is about the different collaborations, different partnerships, regardless of if it's banking collaborations that we've seen on the instant payments, or if it's bank fintech collaborations and partnerships. We also have innovation-friendly regulators, which is crucial in order to be able to bring innovation in a highly regulated space like banking and like fintech. And there's also a lot of focus in the Nordics on the user-centric design and inclusion. And I think that's a bit of the complete opposite of what is happening in many ways, in many places in the world right now.
Thank you. And Sarah and Georg, please bear with me for just a couple of minutes. I'm just giving you a very quick introduction to our next part. So FIBE has always aimed to encourage discussions and give people a platform to speak up. So for this part now, we've formulated 2 statements that are already gaining traction in the current debate and bring together a range of controversial opinions. You can definitely say that. So we would like to hear our experts' thoughts, and who knows, maybe we can continue the discussion next week in person. So for this first statement, for Sarah and Georg, it says, Europe regulates, China innovates, and the US monetizes. Europe's regulatory first approach slows growth. China's ecosystem moves at breakneck speed, and the US turns everything into a billion-dollar business. What do you say?
You want to start? Or have to start. So let me be contradicting this statement a little bit. So first of all, yes, Europe is indeed often exaggerating with regulation. However, especially in fintech, regulation can have a really important role as well. And in fact, if I look at the time before the EU, which really regulated now financial services, the banking market specifically was much more fragmented. And nowadays, it's much easier to scale a digital bank all across the EU than it is to scale a digital bank across the United States. Why? Because with one bank license in Europe, you can scale to essentially every country in the European Union and the European Economic Area through passporting. You just need one bank license. In the US, you would need multiple bank licenses, banking charters, in order to operate nationally. That's the reason why most new banks in the US don't have their own banking charter, but work with other banks. But if you want to found a proper bank, it's actually easier in Europe. So there is actually a lot of regulation that can help scale banks and fintechs across Europe, and Europe is doing a pretty decent job in that regard. In addition, if you look at some of the largest fintechs in the world, actually quite a large number of them are coming from Europe. In fact, if we would not have lost out Stripe to move from Ireland to San Francisco, we might actually have one of the largest fintechs globally. So I think Europe is actually doing a pretty good job in fintech specifically. There are certain aspects, in my opinion, where the regulation was overshooting, especially when it comes to, for example, MiCAR is a great example. MiCAR, I think, did a good job in generally creating certainty around digital assets. I think that was good. It did overshoot quite a bit when it comes to stable currency, essentially almost making a lot of US dollar denominated stable coins as essentially totally basically illegal in Europe, which in my opinion wasn't smart. But generally speaking, I think there is a lot of good regulation out there, and I don't think that the statement is totally correct to say that everything the EU is doing in terms of regulation for fintechs is bad. The one thing that I believe we can become better at is monetization. I don't think Europe is strong enough in monetization, especially when it comes to infrastructure fintechs. And on the other side, definitely one thing we're not good enough is attracting global capital and actually building, I would say, leaping ahead in other technology areas, especially in AI, where Europe is, of course, lagging behind. So in my opinion, it's not necessarily the financial regulations that's a problem in regulation, but it's essentially the intersections with other areas, for example, AI, for example, blockchain, where Europe is in some areas lagging behind. Otherwise, I think we should be really proud of what Europe built in the last decade in terms of fintech.
If I should add something to that, I think you've brought a lot of very good points, Georg, and you were stealing some of my own pointers as well. To add on to it is to say that, yes, we do a lot of regulations in EU, but that also ensures that we get on the right path, that we're not experiencing the big frauds, the big challenges, or the biggest frauds or the biggest challenges, but that we're instead ensuring that we're doing more right from the beginning in a fairly sensitive industry like open banking or in banking at all overall. That'd be the first one on my side.
So then let's move over to the second statement, for which I would also like Achim on the screen, since your opinion would be really interesting as well. It may sound contradictory, but we need the FIDE regulation for future innovation. What you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and it is.
Really,
sorry.
Absolutely, and the question is really important because we've seen how PSD2 has been progressing, and we've seen the challenges with it, and we've seen the opportunities with it, and we've actually also now, 10 years later, since we got it on the table for the first time, seen what is the actual impact of it. And if you look at the consumer banking, impact has been very, very small. Open banking has been improving existing services, but the big shift where consumers are moving away from banks and banks are losing the interfaces hasn't really happened. So I see that banks are still reluctant because the first thing they always look at is what is the opportunity at, or what is at risk when we do this. And the more you focus on something, the more that happens. And meaning that if you focus on what a risk is right now, then you will see risks everywhere. But if you focus on what the opportunity is right now, then you will see opportunities all the way. So keeping this focus on what is at risk is going to slow down the innovation. But I believe that if we are able to shift that into what is the opportunity, then FIDA can become real magic for consumers, for businesses, for banks, and for fintechs.
Okay, so I jump in. FIDA for sure is a huge opportunity, and we have from, let's say, the banking world a little bit the fear that it is again creating a lot of red tape, and this is something like Georg said earlier. We have to be focusing very much on competitiveness in our financial system. And you all might remember that PSD2 was also an opener, first heavily battled on if it is important, but then it opened for the first step of API banking, open banking, the world of finance. And for FIDA, yeah, you have to look very closely. Will we have standards, and then the industry develop the standards, opens up further on open banking? I'd really like to see this more than, again, pages of detailed, regulated next steps. And then that's why you might see a little bit fears of the banks, the savings banks, what's coming up. Overall, I totally agree with what you've said, Sarah.
Excellent. So I think generally speaking, FIDA, I think can be really powerful and important. I think the one thing Europe, or we have to be careful with, is that we don't make data access so complex, and that it's only the big techs that can really effectively scale their, I would say, their businesses, and we kill a lot of the innovation that happens on a small scale because you might have already so much regulatory effort just to get a business started. Rather, it pays off only when you're already large, which essentially would open the door for mostly American or international companies to use FIDA. Having said that, I think it's important for consumers, and it opens up a lot of new business models, in a similar way, but more larger extent than PSD2, and especially, of course, it's a total game changer for open banking. So I'm quite excited to see what new business models might develop because of that.
Thank you to the three of you. We're almost at the end. Before we wrap up this festival preview, we have one more point on the agenda for you. From the 5th to 18th of February this year, we conducted an online survey with a representative sample of 500 individuals aged 16 to 40 in each of the following countries: Germany, France, the Netherlands, and Sweden. The questions were developed by the Fintech and Finance Festival FIBE. And Lisa, could you please walk us through some of the findings?
Of course. Thank you, Madeleine. So let's dive in. First of all, we analyzed the importance of fintech apps in our 4 selected countries, as Madeleine already mentioned. The results we see now show that in the Netherlands, almost 80% of the population aged 16 to 40 use fintech apps. In France, on the other hand, the reported usage rate among respondents was 34. Germany and Sweden, as you can see in the graphs, fall within the mid-range. To gain a deeper understanding of the usage of fintech apps, our respondents were asked which features and functionalities of these apps they considered a priority, regardless of whether they actively used them. The analysis shows that payment processing is the main focus. In the Netherlands, this is the dominant reason for fintech adoption. Similarly, in Germany and Sweden, although at a lower rate than in the Netherlands. Payment processing emerges as the most frequently cited use case. One notable exception is a data set in France, where budgeting apps take precedence over the payment-related functionalities. And just to give one additional insight from the detailed report, which will be available to download after the Digital Festival preview, simplicity, speed, and the continuous availability of fintech services are the 3 primary drivers of the usage of fintech apps. Next, the respondents of all countries, Germany, Sweden, and France, and the Netherlands, were asked to evaluate the following statements. I would just go through them, just that not everybody has to read. I trust major fintechs providers more than traditional banks. Digital banking solutions are not truly customer friendly, whereas neobanks and fintechs are. I have concerns about storing my personal or financial data in fintech apps. I would use fintech apps more frequently if they were more transparent. And I trust investments managed by human professionals more than those based on AI. And the data shows that among the respondents aged 16 to 40, trust in fintechs is already well established, particularly in Germany. And in addition, concerns about the data storage remain prevalent, particularly in France, where 66% of the respondents expressed reservations. And cross-country comparisons suggest that fintech adoptions has the potential to increase if transparency on privacy and security is improved. This effect appears to be particularly strong in Germany when we look at the 69%. And but all of them said the usage would increase if the transparency were improved. And lastly, the representative B2C survey we are showing you at the moment asked about the future challenges for Europe in the context of the US elections. And before I go into depth, it is important to note that these results are a snapshot of time. So the survey was conducted shortly after Donald Trump took office, meaning that subsequent developments are not taken into account. But when we look at the graphs, a key finding is that the respondents in all countries surveyed agreed on the importance of climate policy and sustainability, which they see as a high priority issue for Europe. And there is also a strong support for the European independence, although country-specific variations are evident. And another prominent result is that the high level of endorsement, particularly in Germany, regarding future innovation funding is visible. Nearly half of the respondent prioritizes this aspect. And that was our first sneak peek into the study. So back to you, Madeleine.
Thank you so much, Lisa. There will be a report coming and also press release. And since we've reached the end, and since there are no questions for the time being, I'd like to finish this festival preview and thank all of you for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope to see you, many of you, next week in Berlin in the City Cube. If you have further questions, feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or email or still in the comments, and then we'll get back to you. And thank you for watching.